What is going on at Exeter Chiefs? How bad have things got there at Sandy Park? And what is the outlook for a club which has given us in the past maybe the greatest club rugby story of all time, in going from the lower leagues to the very summit of English and European rugby? An incredible feat by Rob Baxter, who is, however, now a man who is under severe pressure, with a lot of people saying that he needs to go and Exeter need to move with the times and bin Rob Baxter. What do you have to say about that? Let me know in the comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe. I've had quite a few people saying, hey, keep covering the Premiership, Tim. Well, hey, look, watch, like, comment and share the video if you want more Premiership rugby content. This one is really interesting. So the story, Exeter Chiefs have suspended 2 of their coaches pending a review into what was a record ever defeat in the Premiership. 79 points to 17 they lost to Gloucester on Sunday, which prompted the CEO and the chairman, Tony Rowe, to come into the dressing room. This was captured on the cameras. Came into the dressing room to dress down his players. Basically, well, we don't know exactly what was said, but I assume saying that is unacceptable, to say the least. And Rob Baxter keeps trying to hand the reins over to someone else on the day-to-day running of the team, and he keeps having to come back down and do it again himself, because no one seems to be able to replace him. But is Rob Baxter where the problem is? That's what some people are saying. This all just lets the air out of the balloon that was the positive news for Exeter Chiefs, announced only a few days ago that Len Ikitau, the Australian international, will be signing for next season, which is a dynamite signing for the club, for the Premiership. But you wonder what Len Ikitau is thinking right now. Like I say, a lot to unpack on this one, and let me know what you think down below. But first, and just before I get into Exeter Chiefs particularly, I want to talk more generally about where this set me thinking. And the first thing this made me think was, this is symptomatic of the issues with the Gallagher Premiership. So there are only 5 match days in a game week in the Premiership because there's only 10 teams. Of those 5 matches at the weekend just gone, 3 of them were absolute beatdowns. Newcastle getting pumped by Bath, Exeter, like I say, getting a record defeat away at Gloucester, and Harlequins just rolling over against Leicester. These 3 teams are the 3 bottom teams in the Premiership, and they are the 3 teams that have nothing to play for due to the, in my opinion, ridiculous structure and organisation of the Premiership, which has no promotion and relegation. And, you know, you've seen me talk about this on the channel. If you've been watching for a while, you'll have seen me talk about the lack of relegation in the Premiership, and how, oh, the powers that be, they're always telling us it's only temporary. Relegation, promotion is definitely coming back. It's absolutely coming back. And I've said consistently, believe it when I see it. I just don't believe them, that that's what they want. And lo and behold, last week, there was an announcement that they're planning on having no promotion and relegation, making a franchise system, and any team getting added to the Premiership will be on the basis not of their league performance, but on the basis of things like their social media following. I won't go into what I think about that, but you can probably guess. Compounding the issues in the Premiership, no promotion and relegation is one thing, but also 8 out of the 10 teams qualifying for the Champions Cup means there is no jeopardy for a bunch of teams. So Harlequins, having basically lost their promotion chances, playoff chances, I should say, last week, they were already in the Champions Cup. They've qualified. They're in 8th position. They're not going to miss out on that. So really, mentally, it looked like Harlequins were on the beach, wanting the season to be over. You could say, well, what about Northampton Saints? They're also not going to make the playoffs, but they went and won at the weekend. Yeah, but they've got a Champions Cup semi-final to prepare for. So they've got an incentive to keep the wagons and the momentum rolling. Whereas Harlequins, Exeter, Newcastle do not, because there is no threat of going down, and they know exactly whether they're going to be in the Challenge or the Champions Cup next season. So I've got a massive problem with the Premiership for that. And when you compare it to the URC, I much prefer the situation with the URC, because whilst there's no promotion and relegation, there is 16 teams in the league, which means there is some jeopardy fighting for those playoff and Champions Cup spots. 10 teams from 5th down to 14th, Cardiff to Connacht, were going into the weekend and still are going into the next couple of rounds of games in a position right now to qualify for the playoffs and for the Champions Cup. That brings with it jeopardy. There are only 2 out of 16 teams that have nothing to play for. That's Dragons and Zebre. Whereas in the Premiership, 8 out of 10 get to the Champions Cup. It's just crazy. And then just to take the perfect model, in my humble opinion, and that is the top 14, where it has not just playoffs, which are hard and competitive to get into and keep a storyline going all year, but you also have relegation as a threat. Consequently, every single team has something to play for. Poe in 11th can qualify. They're only 4 points off the playoffs, 6th spot. So down to 11th can qualify for the playoffs with 4 rounds of games to go. 12th, 13th and 14th still have to battle for relegation. And Stade Francais play Perpignan in the next round of games, and that is going to be absolutely epic. Vannes, the scenes at the final whistle when they beat Toulon at the weekend just gone were incredible. And that is because they have a league structure with the threat of relegation. It's why the top 14 have a TV deal that absolutely dwarfs the Premierships, and why I think French rugby is only going to get stronger, which pains me to say because I want the Gallagher Premiership to be good, but it just isn't. And that is all sort of background and foundation laying for the story of Exeter Chiefs, who were absolutely abject against Gloucester, 79 points to 17. Like, truly awful. So what's that? Yeah, they basically doubled their negative points difference in one match. They've had 15 games this season so far in the league. In the previous 14, their points difference was like minus 70. And then it was like minus 56 in this one match. Or minus 52 in this one match, or whatever it was. Anyway, bottom line is that they nearly doubled their negative points difference in one game. They've been competitive whilst they've been losing. They were not remotely competitive in this one. It looks like they've given up. Something was a bit rotten in that performance, which caused Tony Rowe to go into the dressing room. Now, this is the first thing that has caused a bit of a reaction. A lot of people online saying that this is out of order. Tony Rowe shouldn't have done it. For what it's worth, Rob Hunter said, he's the head coach, or was, said after the game, quote, Tony is entirely entitled to come in there. He puts a lot of time and effort into the club, and his expectations and everyone else's expectations should be way, way higher. So it doesn't seem like anyone at the club's got a problem with him coming in there. I don't either. I think the only reason this is a story is because it was captured on the TV cameras. I suspect things like this may well happen from time to time. It does feel quite a kind of French thing to do, but there you go. I've got no major issue with that one. It was a really, really bad performance, and that's the bigger question: is why? The outcome of the game, and this is where I think a lot of the criticism have come. Some people have been saying it's really harsh to pin this on the coaches. Rob Hunter was made head coach last month, promoted from forwards coach to replace Ali Heifer, who was demoted, if you like, or moved sideways at least, to attack coach. The pair of them have now both been suspended pending a review of this performance and a look into exactly what is going on at the club more generally before a decision is made. That, I mean, saying they're suspended feels like it's, well, they're gonna get the bullet at some point. Just might be a few weeks yet. But is that the right thing to do? Rob Baxter is getting stick. And let's talk about that for a second. People are saying he's Teflon. He's where the problem is. He's the one that needs to go. He's only saving his own bacon by getting rid of the coaches. Let's just go back in time a little bit before we judge Rob Baxter, because I think there should be a statue of the guy erected at Sandy Park, frankly. He is an absolute legend, but he is under fire. He is the head coach, or was the head coach. He's currently director of rugby. That led them to glory. They came from the lower leagues, like level 5, I think, Rob Baxter, or level 3 or 4 or whatever, was when Rob Baxter stopped playing for Exeter. He's been there his whole life. He was a ball boy back in the day. Then he was a player. Then he was the coach. Then he got them promoted from the Championship to the Premiership. Then he won the Premiership in 2017 and also again in 2020 when he did the double, because they reached the summit of Europe, the last English team to win the Champions Cup, beating Toulouse, beating Racing 92 in the final and semi-final. Absolutely incredible achievement. And I think it's the greatest club rugby story that there's ever been in the world. I'm not exaggerating when I say that, and I don't think we'll see a story like that again. And you ask anyone that was in that squad, you ask any Exeter Chiefs fan back at the time, the reason this happened, Rob Baxter.
So that's why I have an issue with the suggestion that Rob Baxter has like thrown coaches under the bus to save himself. I honestly think if the best thing for Exeter Chiefs was Rob Baxter stepping aside, Rob Baxter wouldn't need asking. He would do it. He's been there his whole life. Child, player, coach. He's not some megalomaniac. He's an amazing bloke. And he keeps trying to hand over the reins to other people. He keeps trying. He was the head coach. Then he wanted to step back from the day-to-day running of the team. So he became director of rugby, overseeing recruitment and things like that. As I say, started as a player. He's looked after recruitment and all of that. And he keeps handing the reins over to other head coaches who keep not being able to fill his shoes. So he keeps having to come back and do it himself. You could argue that maybe the shadow that Rob Baxter is casting means that coaches aren't able to fill his boots because he's still there in the organisation. I'm sympathetic to that. But one of the things he does look after, Rob Baxter, that is recruitment. And if there's a criticism to be made about him, I think there is maybe a legitimate one to be made there. Have a look at the team that won the Champions Cup in 2020. Just look at some of those faces. A lot of them household names, internationals, British and Irish Lions. And that team got completely taken apart because they went off to earn the money that they deserved to earn, but the Exeter Chiefs weren't able to pay them. So the players that left, Luke Cowan-Dickey, Harry Williams, Johnny Gray, Johnny Hill, Dave Ewers, Sam Simmons, Nick White, Joe Simmons, Jack Knoll, Tom O'Flaherty, Stuart Hogg, Thomas Francis, Sam Skinner, Janis Kirsten, others too. All players who have since left. A lot of them left immediately following the Champions Cup. Some of them since. All left for more money and opportunities elsewhere. A lot of them in France, for example. Literally the best team in the Northern Hemisphere were taken apart. How much of that was a factor of the salary cap system in England? Yeah, undoubtedly. How much of that is the financial situation specifically at Exeter Chiefs? I've no doubt that plays into it. I understand that they are not flush with cash at Exeter, and there may well be worse to come on that front. Things could be. I don't know, but from what I understand, they're in a precarious position. I guess the criticism you can level at Rob Baxter is, yeah, but he assembled this new squad that maybe aren't up to it. I actually thought he'd done quite a good job with his recruitment. I'm now starting to wonder whether that is the case. But he essentially kept hold of a few experienced players, Henry Slade, Jack Yendall, Jacques Vermeulen, a kind of core leadership group, experienced heads. And other than that, he supplemented it with kids that he discovered at Exeter University, kids that have come through the academy, and people that he's picked up that were maybe undervalued elsewhere or became available and he managed to get relatively cheap because they're young. Greg Fisselau looks to be an incredible talent. He signed Emmanuel Faye-Waboso, which was an unreal signing. There's more as well, isn't there? David Jenkins and Chris Chunza, for example. Amazing potential. Whether they realise the potential that Rob Baxter clearly sees in them and whether that comes soon, that remains to be seen. And, if there's a criticism to be levelled at Rob Baxter, it's that has he overestimated the potential of these young guys? Or is it that the coaches that he's put in there to get the best out of these players that he's assembled are not doing the job? I don't know. That's where it gets a little bit more unclear. What I will say is, again, if Rob Baxter has made these signings of all these youngsters, all these kids, and from what I understand, Exeter Chiefs are significantly, like by millions, underneath the salary cap. If Rob Baxter has done that because the money was available but he didn't think he needed to spend it, that's one thing. And that might be worthy of some significant criticism. My guess is, if Exeter Chiefs are millions under the salary cap, which is only 6.4 million, and they could be some way below that, if that is the case because the financial situation at Exeter Chiefs is not strong, that's a very different conversation altogether. Are Exeter Chiefs at the level they're at? Are they putting in the performances they're putting in this season purely because of the money that is being spent. Because, and look, nothing excuses 79-17. They should do a lot better than that. And that's why there's going to be a bit of an inquest into that game. But there is no doubting the direct relationship between money spent and outcomes in terms of performance. Look at the teams that are top of the URC, the Premiership, and the top 14. Leinster, Bath, Toulouse spend more money than anyone else. The teams at the top spend more. Generally, the teams at the bottom spend the least. And that is the case. Dragons spend the least in the URC, they're bottom. Newcastle spend the least in the Premiership, they're bottom. Van spend the least in the top 14, they're bottom. I would imagine, it would be my guess, Exeter Chiefs spend the second lowest in terms of salaries, and they have the second lowest position in the Premiership table. That would be my guess. And in which case, where's the controversy? And what is the issue? Obviously, again, nothing excuses 79-17, but this is where you have to understand the context that the clubs are in before you can make a proper judgment. And that's why I think that the people saying Baxter out, he's gone, his ideas are past it, he can't do it anymore, he's a spent force, all of this sort of stuff, I think is social media hot air and not necessarily related to the facts as they are. I think he's had a go at assembling a team on the cheap with a lot of potential and thought that they might blossom and they might be able to squeeze more value out of that squad. Is that option backfiring? I think the answer to that is a year or two away, because David Jenkins is a class player. Emmanuel Faye-Waboso is awesome. They have some massive areas of concern. Scrum half and fly half are just not good enough. Front row is not good enough. Those are also some of the most expensive positions to fill on a rugby pitch. And there's a lot of clubs that have a lot of need in those particular areas. Fly half in particular, massively difficult to find someone. I just asked Leicester Tigers. They've got a big war chest of £600,000 and they're struggling to find a fly half for next season, even with all that money. So it's a competitive world. They're up against top 14. They're up against URC. They're up against Japan, Super Rugby, and they're struggling to compete. I suspect that Len Ikitau has been signed instead of a fly half so that Henry Slade can move to 10 next season. That would be my best guess. But Exeter have some serious areas of need. Rob Baxter definitely has some responsibility for a lack of recruitment in some key areas, but I don't think for a second there is any sense in getting rid of him. As for the coaches, I totally feel sorry for them. I do wonder whether there's a little bit of a footballification of rugby, and this is something else I've spoken on the channel about before, a little bit of a footballification of rugby going on here. You've got one bad result, humiliating result, and coaches on the chopping block. You've got players like Nolan Le Garrec diving in matches. You've got fans on social media coming up with spicy hot takes, very much like they're following football. And I would kind of like, well, I don't want to finish with it was better in the olden days, but I don't like how much kind of footballism, if that's even a word, it is now, is creeping into rugby. And maybe the suspension of these coaches is another example of that. I will certainly go that far on it, but it's quite an interesting talking point. You know, maybe I'd have got more views on this video if I'd come up with one of those spicy hot take type things, Baxter out and all the rest of it. But I honestly don't believe that. And I honestly don't believe things are... I don't believe anyone at Exeter Chiefs is doing an especially bad job. I think there are financial constraints, there are issues, but a lot of those issues are more connected to the league as a whole, to the structure of the competition, to the financial limitations that English rugby clubs are imposing on themselves, and Exeter Chiefs are just kind of having to deal with the new situation that we find ourselves in. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and I'll get stuck in with the comments with you. So tell me what you think. Give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.